former Fulton County District Attorney and Sheriff.
Formerly a judge, and he knows a little bit about how these things go.
From Mohawk Valley, legal eagle, lawman.
He is the Sheriff of Fulton County, New York. Just such an amazing guy.
This is the Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.
Hey, I'm your host, Rich Giardino. Thanks for tuning in to the Rich Giardino Show. We have an interesting guest tonight, a longtime friend and a longtime local celebrity in Saratoga, Albany, upstate New York. Before I give away the secret, you're listening to us on either Spotify, Apple, X, YouTube, or Facebook and Rumble. We ask you to share, like, and listen to us and subscribe on any one of those premium platforms. My guest today is Mark Mulholland. He's been with WNYT 13, the local NBC affiliate in Albany, New York, and he's been there for 30 years. Our careers have kind of tracked each other. I met him when I was an assistant DA and DA. He's covered cases that I prosecuted, cases that I tried, and legal issues that I've dealt with as a sheriff. So, Mark, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much.
Rich, it's my pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be on this side being asked the questions rather than asking the questions.
It's going to be tough for me because you always make me sound better than I am, and you make me sound smarter than I am. I don't know what I can do to reciprocate. But a lot of people don't know your background, where you're from, and where you went to school and things. I do know that you grew up in a restaurant family, and that hits home with me. What kind of food did your family prepare, and where was the restaurant?
Everything, you name it. It was we called it a fine dining restaurant, but it was in upstate New York, in Whitehall, Washington County, New York. For those who don't know, that's the birthplace of the United States Navy. It's right there at the mouth of Lake Champlain there. So it's famous for that. But our restaurant was called Skeen Manor. It was fine dining. I was the youngest of 9, and I think that was because, for 2 reasons. It's cold in upstate New York in the winter, as you know, and my parents were Roman Catholic. And the other reason is that my parents needed staff for the restaurant. So I did everything there. I did wash dishes, all those things, stocked the bar, waited on tables, you name it. And I like to think that's where I got my work ethic because, as you know, family restaurants are hard work.
But if you're the youngest of 9, that explains why all those years of the pent up not being able to get a word in edgewise, why you went to the media. So now you can lead the conversation. Where'd you do your schooling, and what was your major in things?
I'm a New York bred through and through. I went to state school, SUNY Brockport. For those who don't know, it's near Rochester, New York. And I majored in broadcast communications and journalism. So I was, while I was in high school, I was a class officer. So I had an opportunity to do some public speaking. So I thought, hey, maybe this would be a career that I could pursue. And I pursued radio and then TV. So while in college, I did radio news for a small radio station in Glens Falls, New York. And right after graduation from college, I went to a small television station in Glens Falls, Queensbury. And then shortly after that, I came to the NBC station here, News Channel 13.
So for those of us who have been interviewed by you or covered by you, tell us how it works. So like when you start out at WNYT, did you start as like a weekend reporter or a field guy? Do you then move up to anchor, or how does it work? Like how's the progression?
Yeah, all of those things. So I should tell you that when I started at the small station right out of college, little station called Channel 8, I did everything. So I was the sports director, but that means that I did pretty much everything. Sweep the floors, mop the floors, shoot video highlights myself. I'd go out every night, shoot video highlights, then come back. We had 2 live nightly newscasts, and I would put together sportscasts for the 5:30 news and the 10 o'clock news. So that's where I got my experience doing all of that stuff. So I would shoot, edit, write, and then anchor the sports every night. But when I started at Channel 13 here, the NBC station in Albany, I would do what we called a scanner report. So I would listen to police and fire emergency scanners and then go on the 11 o'clock news, somewhere near the top of the 11 o'clock news, and say, for example, the Fulton County Sheriff is investigating a report of a fire or some sort of emergency event. And then I would say, and I'll check back with you later with the latest information a little later in this newscast. So I would do that every night. That was what I would do every weeknight. we would call it the operations center. I had to think of what we called it, but it was called the operations center. So the anchors would throw it to me saying, hey, what are police and firefighters working on right now? And that was how I got my feet wet here at Channel 13. In addition to that, I anchored the weekend sports. So I was doing the operations center during the week and the weekend sports on the weekends. So I did that for several years. And then when my wife and I had a child, our first child, I said, maybe I don't want to be working weekends all the time. So I had asked to become a weekday field reporter, Monday through Friday field reporter. And I did that for several years.
One thing you see in your business, I see in mine and all over, is the rapid turnover. People come in, they use all of us. Is like I refer to people as Fulton County Sheriff's Departments to steal McDonald's. I say we're your best first job in law enforcement, because traditionally they were underpaid, and I'd have people for a year to 3 and they'd say, see you later, I'm going here for $15,000 more, and I couldn't keep them. And one thing you have is longevity, and we don't see a lot of that in your news business. There's a few other anchors around that have, are on the same level as you as far as time wise. And one thing that, as a result, your reputation among, whether you're a judge, a sheriff, or a DA, and with a lot of people I deal with, is your confidentiality. People feel safe if they tell you something and say, please don't run with it today. They know that. So how do you cultivate those relationships? And you must take a certain amount of pride in knowing that you get people call you and say, hey, I got a story for you, but you got to embargo it until.
I do, and I appreciate the friendship and relationship that I have with you. I think it comes with time and trust. You try to build that trust, just like your years of law enforcement, both as a prosecutor and as a sheriff. You have to build trust with people, right? They have to know that when you give them your word, that you're going to follow through, and that's what I've tried to do. And frankly, I'm happy that I feel like at this point in my career, and you may feel the same, Rich, that has paid off, because I hear from people who have stories to tell. They say, well, I've got this story to tell. I'm not quite ready to tell it. Please hold on to it. And they know they can trust me with that story in exchange for me saying, well, please let me break it first. I think you and I have probably discussed a few of those stories through the years. And that's what I find the most gratifying, honestly, that people, after many years in the business, you build up that trust, and that when people trust me, it makes me feel.
And you get good stories. You get, and even the offbeat. Yes. I know more than once. I said, hey, I ran across this person and they've got a fantastic story to tell. And they don't, they're shy. They're not like you or I. They're shy. They need somebody to tell it to. The one thing I just got to take a commercial break. You're listening to Rich Giardino Show, where Constitution, Crime, and Politics meet. Our guest tonight is Mark Mulholland, 30-year member of WNYT News Team and the current evening anchor. Mark has joined us graciously, and we appreciate it. And we're going to continue talking with Mark. But I want you to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and all other premium platforms. Mark, tell us about some of the stories over the years that have impacted you, not only as a reporter or anchor, but as a person. Like, tell us some of the people you came across that you remember, whether they're celebrities, politicians, or regular individuals. What stands out in your mind?
That's a good question, Rich. And some of the people who stand out, I should tell you, for listeners and viewers of this podcast, I should tell you that one of the people I really enjoyed covering through the years was former Governor George Pataki. I first encountered him. I'm sure you encountered him many times through the years, but I first encountered him when I was covering the crash of TWA 800 on East Moriches, Long Island. I was down there. We went flying down in the middle of the night, immediately after the plane seemingly fell from the sky. And I was the little guy down there. There was, for those who remember, there was Bernard Shaw from CNN was there, Tom Brokaw from NBC. Everyone was lined along the beach there as we tried to figure out, as night became day, what happened, what caused this flight to seemingly fall from the sky, killing 100 and some people. But I remember my first encounter with Governor Pataki, because he was serving as the face of that incident, that he was communicating with the families of those who had lost someone, trying to get answers for them. But he was also the face talking to Tom Brokaw live on the NBC Nightly News, talking to Bernard Shaw on CNN. And I was just the little guy, and I was a young kid, and I'm starting out, but I went up to the governor, and I hadn't met him. And I said, "Hey, Governor, it's Mark from WNYT in Albany. Will you come talk to me live on the air?" So here I am, this young kid. He had just done Tom Brokaw. He had just done CNN. And he's like, "Sure, I'll do it." And I always remembered that. So I wanted to point that out because I sent him a handwritten thank you note. That's kind of what I like to do. I learned that years ago that people like to get a note. I mean, I love to get it.
I got one recently from somebody I admire. But what's nice about that is people don't write notes anymore. It's either text or text. Yeah. What gets me is somebody loses somebody, and instead of picking up the phone, "Hey, sorry about your mother," and it's so impersonal in a way. But it's like, I find with me, it's like, I don't want to bother people when they've got so much other things going on. And later on, "Hey, thanks for reaching out," But I will tell you something about George Pataki and Flight 800. If I'm not mistaken, that was in the summer of 1996. And
that's right.
Why I know that is because George Pataki appointed me judge to fill a vacancy in June of 1996. And one of my first assignments was down to Nassau County DA's office. So our Nassau County Court, because they send the judges around the state. Sure. So they sent me down there for 2 months in TWA 800, right? The accident happened, or shoot down, whatever. Kallstrom, I think, was the FBI director out of New York City.
Yeah, that's right.
But I got down there, and I remember I was an assistant DA, and there were 3 of us that left at the same time, and I was the only one who made my commitment. So everyone, they gave us a pewter mug. Me, they gave a plaque. They had a party. They had a big speech because I was the only one who stayed my commitment. And I would do what I would want to do. And then the bureau chief would say, "Look, we're going to experiment with a new rule. Giardino's been doing it for 6 months, but the rest of you are now going to do it," So it was kind of funny. So I went back down in 96, having left in 1984, 85. No, I left in 85 or 86. And in 96, I was back down, this time as a judge. And I went into my old bureau, and there were still some people there. And one of the guys there, he had 2 young assistant DAs in his office, and I still had black hair. And I remember it. And he goes, "Listen," he goes, "this is Judge Giardino. He was an assistant DA. Then he went upstate, became a DA. He goes, he never listened to a thing I said. So whatever, he never listened to one thing I said." And then I said, again, and I won't use his name again, "He just told you I left here not listening to him. I became a DA, and I'm down here as a judge 10 years later. So you guys choose who you want to listen to." And you go,
it worked out okay, right?
It did. So yeah, I was down there at the time, and it was an interesting time. Tell us, so besides Pataki, and he's, like I said, he appointed me, so I was very, I said, I can't criticize the guy's judgment because he made me a judge. But tell us a little bit about others that you've encountered along the way.
Yeah, there are others. I covered a lot of sports. So we used to cover the Jets and the Giants every weekend. We would go down to cover the Jets and Giants every weekend. I covered Pat Riley, for those who are basketball fans too. Pat Riley was from this area as well, from Schenectady, not far from where you're talking to me right now. He went to Linton High School. He came back. He had the gym named after him, and he had just won half dozen championships in the NBA, both with the LA Lakers and the Miami Heat, which he now runs. And I had the opportunity to interview him, and I said, "Hey, Pat, how does this compare, having your name on the wall here at your high school?" And he looked at me and he started crying. I'm like, "Whoa, I didn't expect that." Here this guy has conquered the world of sports, and he comes back to his hometown. And he said, "Well, you know what? To have your name on the wall of your high school forever is just as meaningful as these rings that I have on my finger." So I'll always remember that one. But as far as the stories which are most memorable, and those that stay with me and on occasion keep me up at night, I think you can relate to them, are the stories that involve harm to children, Rich. And we've seen our share here in upstate New York, more than our share. And those are the ones that get to me. Those are the ones that I'll always remember.
The kidnapped girl in Monroe Park. And you guys, the family didn't want the name done, and you guys were great. Many stations were good. Some weren't. You guys were great about honoring their wishes. And we never see, you and I, very rarely do we see that happy ending. What happened was horrific. What he did was horrific. But the happy ending was that she was found alive. And she will be able to flourish as life goes on. She'll need support, I'm sure. But the bottom line is I commend you and your station and a few others. But there were some that just disregarded that, you know, and
There were a lot of them. Yeah, there were a lot of them, Rich. And I just had a conversation. For those who don't know, we're talking about the little girl who was abducted, the 9-year-old girl who was abducted from a park here in Saratoga County, New York, from Moreau Lake State Park. It was bona fide stranger danger. It was a little girl riding her bicycle, swooped up by a predator. And yes, almost 2 days later, she was found. She was found by an elite team of police and federal agents who swooped in to save her, to rescue her and arrest him. And he's now serving 47 years in prison. So he will die in prison. But to your point about identifying her, we were identifying her, of course, when they were looking for her, because we wanted to get her picture and her name out to hope that someone across the country would know something about her. But then when it became obvious to me, when it was told to me, you talked about trusted and trusted sources, when it was told to me that this little girl had been harmed in other ways that you can probably use your imagination and figure out, I said, I think we stop using her name. This gentleman has been arrested now. We see him. We know him. We don't identify victims of certain types of crime. So we said, let's not use her name. I got some pushback internally for that. It was like, well, the rest of the world is going to identify her by name now. I said, well, we don't have to. Let's be human first. We are humans, then we are reporters. Our goal is to do no more harm. So I was able to convince our news leadership here that we shouldn't identify her in stories going forward. We could say the 9-year-old girl, but let's not identify her by name, because as we all know, the internet is around forever. So she's going to be old enough to Google and search and find all those things. We don't need her name, at least from our perspective, popping up in future searches. There are other outlets out there who have continued to identify her. In fact, some, I should tell you, Rich, have put his face and her face side by side in their coverage, his name and her name, and also identifying some of the horrible crimes against her. I as a dad myself,
tell us inspirational stories. So before I get to your personal story, which is so inspirational to me, and you and I interviewed on GY, I had John and we talked about it. Before we get to Kelly's Angels, which I think is so important because of the spin on it, but tell us, were there any people you came across who, you know, just you were amazed or you marveled at the fact that they came through adversity and survived?
I want to tell you about, it kind of relates to, this is a story of empathy that I want to share with you, related to what happened at Moreau Lake State Park. So I'll segue for you if you don't mind. So in addition to my day job, I started this foundation in memory of my wife who passed away from breast cancer. And I think you wanted to talk a little bit more about that later on if we can. But I wanted to mention this story to you because we started this organization called Kelly's Angels, which provides grants to children who lost a parent to cancer. We expanded that mission to help children who've suffered in any way. So if a family in the capital region of upstate New York is suffering in any way, whether they've gone through some sort of incident, difficulty, challenge, death in the family. So I reached out to the family of the little girl who was abducted in Moreau Lake State Park, saying our all-volunteer organization, our board, wants to do something nice for your daughter, for your family. Send them on a nice little getaway, not unlike Make-A-Wish. Send them to a stay at the indoor water park that we have here in upstate New York. Anything like that. We'd like to do it to bring a smile to your face and the face of your daughter and your entire family. So I reached out to this mother of a little girl who was kidnapped. And her immediate reply to me was, thank you very much, but I'd like you to offer whatever nicety, whatever nice gesture you were going to offer to me, offer to the daughter of the man who kidnapped my daughter. I get goosebumps still when I tell that story because here she was. She'd gone through this horrible situation, but she was so empathetic that she knew that this beast of a man, this predator, had his own daughter, and was also suffering from being embarrassed, of being ostracized. So she said, take that kindness and give it to the daughter of the man who took my daughter. And so I reached out to the mother of that little girl, and she was so happy, so thankful, so grateful that through their tears, they were to offer something to the family of the man who caused
that's so important, because I've often said in my business as a DA, a judge, now as a sheriff, some bad person, somebody will do something bad, and the family gets marked by that. And there's hardworking family members, there's innocent family members, and we do definitely need to concentrate on the victims and their families. But we got to remember that not everybody is evil in that person's family, and they're always going to have to carry around that. It's like you can mention any multitude of serial killers or people who do vile, disgusting things. One of the things that, and we'll talk now a little bit about Kelly's Angels, but one of the things you did was you took the concept of Make-A-Wish for kids with cancer and other illnesses who are dying, and instead of giving them something, you said, hey, having been through it with your wife, and how long was the journey from when your wife and you were told that she was sick to her passing?
Yeah, that was a difficult journey. Thanks for allowing me to talk about it, Rich. So she was 32. Kelly was 32 years old when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. No family history, no history of cancer in the family, so it came from nowhere. But we always thought we were going to beat it. Kelly was my wife and the mother of our two children, Connor and McKenna. She was a teacher, a beloved teacher. She loved to teach. We all had teachers we remember. Kelly was that person. She was the one who inspired children who loved her. They loved to hug her. She was a third grade teacher, and they loved her. So she always wanted to get better, not only for our children, but for the children she taught. So when she passed, she fought valiantly for almost 5 years. So she died 6 days after her 37th birthday, leaving behind our children at the time who were 7 and 5. So I thought, we've got to start an organization which will honor her legacy and also help kids who have been affected by the loss of someone to cancer. So we started that in my family room in my home in Saratoga County with myself and a few friends. And it's an all-volunteer organization. And that was almost 15 years ago now. And now we give away on the regular again, it's all volunteer. We give away about $100,000 to families in our region every year. We're well over that in 2020.
And your major fundraiser is the walk, run, ride in the park, right? And,
yes.
And
yes. On
and that's not only walk, run, ride, it's eat. There's cider donuts. There's local specialties. I don't walk. The only place I walk is from my car to the donuts, but we try to get out.
You participate and support it, though. You participate and you bring your family to support it, which I'm grateful for.
And it's such a worthwhile, and it's a fun event. It's not, you're not crying, except there's a few people crying for joy, but it's such a fun event to come out. And when it's a nice day, it's beautiful. And then every couple of years you have the ball. What's that about a little bit?
Yeah, we're going to have a gala coming up on October 11th, 2025, and I hope you'll participate, and I hope your viewers will participate. It's a special date, so it's going to be at the Saratoga Springs City Center. It's going to celebrate 15 years of Kelly's Angels. We're calling it Calling All Angels, and it's a special date because it's Kelly's birthday. It's actually October 11th is actually her birthday. So we're going to celebrate 15 years of helping families in the capital region and celebrate Kelly's birthday. So we're looking forward to that.
And they can Google Kelly's Angels. How else do they get a hold of you or the project to volunteer?
Kelly's Angels is the best way to do it. Kelly's Angels Inc. is our website, kelly'sangels.org. That's INC, not INK. We're not a tattoo organization. It's INC. So that's the best way. Or we're on Facebook, of course, too. But it's been a terrific organization. It continues to grow. And I think it's because so many of us have been touched by cancer. I know your family has been touched by cancer and loss too. So all of us have.
My niece was 16 years old, and she fell skiing on the lake in front of my house, and she hurt her neck. And we thought it was just from the fall, and they found a tumor on her spine, and my brother's daughter, and she spent a year and a half or 2 years fighting it, and they moved out of the district, and she said, Uncle Rich, can I live with you? Going back to school. And you know how it is. I mean, everybody was shaving their heads. All her friends were shaving their heads when she had her treatments. Yeah. And it just stays with you. And the one thing that and I've mentioned this on other programs, I'm not embarrassed to mention it. When you're dealing with a loved one or a family member or a close friend who's passing to the other side because of an illness, what bothers us as human beings is one day you're praying that they survive and get well, and then the switch happens, and the next day you're praying that they pass away peacefully in their sleep.
Yeah.
And as human beings, we say, why? How can I do this? How can I pray that my niece passes away? And then the breath is, I just don't want to see her suffer anymore. And so we come to that realization, which is counterintuitive, I think, as human beings, but it's the right, it's the right decision, and counterintuitive. Yeah. I mean, you and I have both had health things that were scares that turned out not to be stuff in the past. And I told you I was misdiagnosed with the end-stage liver, and I thought for a month, very scary for you. Yeah, for a month I thought I was going, and all my friends said I was nuts because I wanted a pre-death life celebration. I said, I want to hear people say nice things about me. And one of my friends said, what makes you think they'll say nice stuff? I said, look, if I give them free booze and free food, they'll say nice stuff. So a lot of stuff goes through your mind. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that's important that I didn't ask you about your career? And I mean, and your sustainability, to be on the news, to do it every day. People don't realize, even for you, because probably very much like me as a sheriff when I was DA, you do absorb a lot of that stuff firsthand, whether it's missing people, unsolved cold cases, or tragic accidents when you cover a funeral or a wake. And they don't understand that you're a human being and you absorb that. I have a cousin who's an empath, you and I, Kathy, my cousin. And she says that it's like rusty water that you just fill your inner spirit with because you absorb all this over time, because it's hard to get rid of the feelings that you're getting from the other people. And you have to have that same experience. I would think.
Well, you have too. I mean, you've been to those crime scenes. You've made those notifications in the middle of the night, and then so it wears on you, right? You have to try to separate it. And I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know if you can. I always hear people say, "No, that's work. I can separate that." But especially when it, like I said before, when it involves children, it's particularly hard. It is to separate, to leave that behind, and to hold it together when you're on the news, delivering the news. That's why again, going back to that Moreau Lake case, I had the opportunity, because people trusted me, as we talked about earlier, I had the opportunity to break the news worldwide that she had been found. So we broke into the NBC Nightly News because I had information that she was found and she was alive. So but as you said, that's the rare example. But when it involves crimes against children or children being hurt or harmed in some way, I don't know the answer. I don't know how you separate that. I know that we all have faith, so I say prayers
and people say that in law enforcement, like, oh, business is business and work is work and life is family and family, but it affects you. And for me, it's like there's no upside of being the one to tell somebody your husband, your wife, your kid's not coming home, and it's like there's some people take it as anger and they blame you because you told them. You're the vessel that told them, and you live with that. But I often wish that I had the ability to make the kids that think it's okay to drink and drive, or the kids that, say, oh, I'm just, doing a little drugs isn't going to kill me, and your best friend just died. And it's like, I say to some of the kids sometimes, I said, look, when they do stupid, reckless stuff and they end up at our holding cell waiting to go to the jail, I'll say, you know what? I said, you got to knock your crap off, because you're not the one who's got to go tell somebody's parents you're not coming home. I said, I do. You want to switch jobs? You want to do that? Then do a videotape of you telling your parents you're not coming home because you thought it was fun to do something stupid. And it is stupid, a lot of it. But I really want to thank you for coming on. Is there any final message, upbeat message you can give our listeners?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned it's interesting you mentioned Upbeat, because we have a podcast. Kelly's Angels has a podcast called The Upbeat, and I want to have you on it as well. But it's about finding those life lessons, finding joy through the times that are dark, through perseverance, being able to find some joy and hope again. So there are lots of stories of that. In fact, we live them every day. So my message is, yeah, it feels hard. There are times when it's hard for all of us. You just mentioned a few of those times, but if we persevere, there is light at the end of the tunnel.
There is. I want to thank our guest, Mark Mulholland from WNYT, anchor and 30-year member of the news team. I want to tell you, you're listening to Rich Giardino Show. You can like, share, and subscribe on Apple, YouTube, X, Facebook, and Rumble. I can't even remember the other ones. The other thing is, listen, if you see law enforcement, EMS, dispatch, fire, please let them know you thank them for what they do. At times they have a very thankless job, and they do their best they can to serve you. And we often forget about the dispatchers, because without the people answering the phones in the 911 centers, you don't get your ambulance, you don't get your fire, and you don't get your police. So thanks a lot, Mark. Really great having you on. I appreciate it.
Like and subscribe to The Rich Giardino Show, part of the Elite Influencer Network, wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll see you next time on The Rich Giardino Show, where the Constitution, crime, and politics meet.